Welcome back to the Black Liberty Podcast. I appreciate everybody tuning in today. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If it's not your first time, please reshare, continue to show your love and your support. I appreciate it. So there's a question on the table today. And the question is, did the North really fight a war to free the slaves? Was it about slavery or was it about something else? See, in school, we've been taught that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. The Union went to war to fight against the Confederate over slavery. But is that really true? Do the facts add up to that notion? Does it back up what is being said? So I decided to do a little research on this, and the results are kind of amazing and whatnot when you think about it, because I've always wondered, okay, is this true? So first things, let's go ahead and hop into it. So July 1861, Congress passed what's called the War Aims Resolution. And this was 3 months after Fort Sumter. And this is what the resolution said: that this war is not waged upon our part in any spirit of oppression, nor for any purpose of conquest or subjugation, nor for the purpose of overthrowing or interfering with the rights of institutions, which was slavery, of the United States, but to defend and maintain the supremacy of the Constitution and to preserve the Union. So the supremacy of the Constitution, that is what allowed and protected slavery. So off back and whatnot, this is coming from Congress in 1861, where they're telling you this: we're not going to war for slavery. We're trying to actually preserve the rights of the institutions to own slaves, which is the rights of the states to own slaves. So really, there ain't even no point in going forward, because Congress has let you know right here in July of 1861 that they didn't go to war and wasn't going to war for slavery. Had nothing to do with it. So as you continue to research and as you continue to dive into this subject, as I begin to dig up more and more and more, I came across what's called the Corwin Amendment. And this is what really, really blew my mind. So the Corwin Amendment is a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution that would shield domestic institutions, which control slavery, of the states from the federal Constitution amendment process and from abolition or interference by Congress. So basically, Congress wouldn't be able to step in and say, okay, you need to let your slaves go. They wouldn't be able to interfere if this amendment passed. So the Corwin Amendment doesn't explicitly use the word slavery, but it was designed specifically to protect slavery from federal power. Now, they proposed this amendment March 2nd of 1861, and this was shortly before the outbreak of the Civil War. And the reason why this amendment never passed is because it was never ratified by the number of states that it needed. Because of the war, it didn't get enough states to ratify it. So a couple of points about this Corwin Amendment. It was a proposed amendment to the Constitution passed by Congress and sent to the states for ratification in 1861. Now check this out. If it had been ratified, it would have protected slavery. And it would have protected slavery from the federal government stepping in and saying, you can't do this anymore. Now, this was an amendment that was conceived by President James Buchanan on his way out of being the president, going into Abraham Lincoln. Now, one thing about Abraham Lincoln is this. People try to say that, well, he never came out and he never said that, he was endorsing it, but he didn't oppose it. And when I'm in this podcast, I'm going to go over some quotes from his own words from his own mouth, stuff that he said himself, and there is documentation and proof of these things that he said where he approved of the Corwin Amendment. So this is really, really important to pay attention to. So this was actually, the Corwin Amendment was actually an early version of the 13th Amendment. And it was proposed by a senator. This was in December of 1860. His name was William Seward. And he was a senator from New York. And what's crazy is he actually joined Lincoln's cabinet as the first Secretary of State. Now, the Corwin Amendment was an effort to basically kind of keep the Union and the Confederate together. It was kind of basically to make everybody kind of comfortable, because the South didn't want to free their slaves, and we've already talked about in the other podcast before that the North still owned slaves. So you had slave owners in the North that wanted to continue to keep their slaves as well. So this amendment was to protect institutions and protect the states from anybody interfering in their right to own slaves. So this gave each state the power to regulate their domestic institutions. So the states, not the government, had a right to say, we want to own slaves, you're not allowed to interfere in this, and we're going to continue slavery. So let's continue on. So Congress would not be able to step in to abolish or interfere with slavery. And by doing so, they could continue to keep slaves forever. That's the craziest thing. So that means even today, slavery would still be going on if the war didn't break out and interfere in the ratification of this amendment. This would have actually replaced the 13th Amendment that we have today. And even in the 13th Amendment, as we discussed before, it mentions that slavery is illegal except for basically somebody that's a criminal. So the Union states, even if they really wanted to free the slaves, they could have. If they really cared about freeing the slaves, they could have freed them. They could have let them all go. But that's not what they decided to do. So, like I said before, slavery would have kept going on and on and on if they had got the numbers needed. But to sit here and say that the Union fought the Confederate to free the slaves is a flat out lie. It's a flat out lie. Congress has said it. This amendment, they tried to pass this amendment that would continue slavery just to make the South feel comfortable. And this same trickle-down process is going on today. Because you have people who today wish that slavery continued. So, this Corwin Amendment passed Congress in March 2nd. It was March 2nd of 1861. And let's read this again just so you understand. No amendment shall be made to the Constitution which will authorize or give to Congress the power to abolish or interfere with any state with the domestic institutions thereof, slavery, including that of a persons held to labor or service by the laws of said state. Now, again, we talk about how great Lincoln was and how he freed these slaves and signed the Emancipation Proclamation, but from his own mouth, that was not the case. That's not how he really felt. So, in his first inaugural on March 4th, 1861, this is what he said. Now, these is his own words. So, y'all can research this and you can look this up and fact check me if you want to, but I have all the resources. If you need them, inbox me, let me know. I'll send you all my information. So, his words are, I understand a proposed amendment to the Constitution. They're talking about the Corwin Amendment. Which amendment, however, I have not seen. Has passed Congress to the effect that the federal government shall never interfere with the domestic institutions of the states, including that of persons held to service. To avoid misconstruction of what I have said, I depart from my purpose not to speak of particular amendments, so far as to say that, holding such a provision to now be implied constitutional law, I have no objection to it being made express and irrevocable. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern states that by the accession of a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of him who now addresses you, talking about himself. I do but quote from one of those speeches which I have declared. I have no purpose directly or indirectly to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. These are his own words, y'all. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. Those who nominated and elected me do so with full knowledge that I had made this and many similar declarations and had never recanted them. And more than this, they placed in the platform for my acceptance and as a law to themselves and to me. The clear and emphatic resolution which I now read. Resolved that the maintenance inviolate of the rights of the states, and especially the right of each state to order and control its own domestic institutions, talking about slavery, according to its own judgment exclusively, is essential to that balance of power on which the perfection and endurance of our political fabric depend. And we denounce the lawless invasion by armed force of the soil of any state or territory, no matter under what pretext, as among the gravest crimes. I now reiterate these sentiments, and in doing so, I only press upon the public attention the most conclusive evidence of which the case is susceptible, that the property, peace, and security of no section are to be in any wise endangered by the now incoming administration. Sorry, that was a mouthful, but I had to read that to you to get you to understand that Abraham Lincoln had no worry about slavery. He had no plan to step in and free the slaves. So why are we continuing to push this narrative that he did? Why are we teaching in schools that he wanted to free the slaves? He didn't care about freeing the slaves. It had nothing to do with slavery. It was all about the Union to him. And so 16 months into the war, on August 22nd, 1862, Abraham Lincoln wrote to a editor in New York. His name was Horace Greeley. And this is what Abraham Lincoln said. My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union. And what I forbear because I do not believe it would help the Union. What more proof do y'all need? What more proof do you need? It's coming from this man's own mouth. And no, nobody's taking anything out of context. This is clear as day what this man is saying. If he could save the Union without freeing a single slave, he'd do it. If he could free some and keep and keep some just to save the Union, he would do it. What more do you need? Aren't we supposed to stand by what people say? Aren't we supposed to? I mean, if somebody is speaking something out of their own mouth and telling you this is what it is, why are we teaching in school something different outside of what this man said? Why are we teaching that he is such a great man? And it just goes to show you again, the whole point of the podcast, the whole point of this topic, the North did not go to war to free the slaves. It had nothing to do with the slaves. And he made that perfectly clear. Congress made it perfectly clear. The North made it perfectly clear. So, 1 month, about September 22nd, 1862, after he wrote that letter to the editor, that's when he issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. And on the very first paragraph of that, he clearly states that the war is being fought to restore the Union and not to free the slaves. He says, I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States of America and Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy thereof, do hereby proclaim and declare that hereafter as heretofore, the war will be prosecuted for the object of practically restoring the constitutional relation between the United States and each of the states and the people thereof, in which states that relation is or may be suspended or disturbed. Had nothing to do with slavery. Nothing. Had everything to do with restoring the relationship between the United States and its states. The Constitution and its states. He wanted to bring that relationship back together. And if he could do that without freeing the slaves, he would have. He said it from his own mouth. So my thing is, you have this narrative, being pushed by white supremacists and by white America in this country that's telling us that we should stop celebrating criminals. But yet we uplift and support a man who supported slavery and said it from his own mouth. So stop going around telling people we shouldn't be having statues of criminals. We shouldn't this, we shouldn't that. But all around this country, when a African American, when a black person walks past a statue of a Confederate general who's a criminal, or somebody who owned slaves, or somebody who supported slavery, we supposed to just keep walking. But then for us, we're told to stop uplifting criminals when they are brutally murdered in the street by the same people that are sworn to protect us. Come on now. This is why critical race theory is important and it needs to be taught. Because America has created this image of greatness for themselves, while the people who built it continue to suffer, will continue to be fed these lies. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. It was the Republicans that freed the slaves. No, it wasn't. They didn't go to war to fight the slaves. And people keep bringing up to me, what about the 600,000 men that died to free the slaves? They didn't die to free the slaves. They wanted to keep their slaves. They wanted to keep them. They didn't die for that. Do you honestly think it would not, if they would have went into that war knowing that that war was being fought to free the slaves? Do you know how many people and whatnot they would have lost in that army? It would have been people leaving left and right, soldiers leaving left and right. They wouldn't have fought the war. And you can look that up as well. So again, this is why it's important to expose things like this, so we can move forward and we don't make the same mistakes. And until we deal with this truth and put these things into the open, we're going to forever struggle with race in this nation. So again, to the question, did the North go to war to free the slaves? No. And they made it clear that they didn't. Now, to this very day, the Corwin Amendment is dormant in Congress. And it's still a part of our law. It is still a part of our congressional institution. And it's still ready to be ratified by the number of states it needs. And this is what's scary, because its adoption by the House and Senate is constitutional fact, and they can't reverse it. So if 35 states today decided to approve the Corwin Amendment, 35 to 36 states, there would be they would literally have to question, is it constitutional law and can it be overruled by the current 13th Amendment? Because remember, this was originally the first 13th Amendment that they were trying to pass. But because the Union began to lose the war, then Abraham Lincoln, like he said he would do, in order to win the war, he would free all the slaves if he had to. But remember, if he didn't have to free any of them and win the war, that's what he would have done. So imagine, and this is the scary part about Black Americans in this country. This is how scary it is for us. Imagine how close to slavery we are right now. All it would take, now, not saying that, this would happen, but all it would take is for these states to approve the ratification, and they could begin to fight for slavery again. And there are many states who wouldn't mind doing it. There are many places in this country that would have no issue to do this. And then y'all tell us that we don't have a right to feel how we feel about this country, and if we don't like it, we should just leave. But we built this country. I don't know how many times I gotta say it. We built this country and we continue to build it today. It's our economic power that fuels this country. It's our money that fuels this country. And without us, you wouldn't have a country. If we all packed it up today and whatnot and went back to Africa, this country wouldn't last a day. Prove me wrong. And you ask, well, where is it in the law that's racist? Where is this? Where is this? Have you heard of the Corwin Amendment? That is still a part of Congress today. And if they vote on it, 35 states and whatnot vote on it, and they get the number of states needed to ratify it, they can begin to fight for slavery again. And because it was passed by Congress right before the Civil War, it's a very real possibility, a very real chance that it could become law. Like I said, not saying that that's going to happen, but it could become law. So don't tell me I don't have a right to protest. Don't tell me I don't have a right to try to tear down these institutions. Don't tell us that we don't have a right to stand up and fight and say that this system is built on racism, because it's right here. The proof and the evidence is right here. You choose whether or not to accept it. But if you dig and you do a little research, you'll find out that everything that you've been taught in school is a lie. But for our people, we know the truth. We live the truth. We live the reality. It's easy to tell somebody to get over it and racism doesn't exist in the country. And here's this thing. One thing that gets me is, like in the last podcast where we talked about critical race theory, one thing that gets me is to sit here and tell people that racism doesn't exist, but then yet turn around and deny critical race theory in school because you claim that it's racist and it teaches white kids to hate each other, to hate themselves, to be ashamed of being white. But yet when you go and you do research and you look it up, you see that the Union and the Confederate both wanted to keep their slaves. It was never about freeing the slaves until the Union started losing the war, and their only last resort and only last option was to free the slaves. It was a military tactical decision. So they didn't do it and fight the war for good mankind. We need to free the slaves. It's not right to have slavery. And they're telling you right here in front of your face that this is not what this is about. Come on now. What more truth do you need? What more proof do you need? When are we going to stand together and live in this truth so we can begin to heal and move forward? You can't expect the country to come together, black and white to come together, and things like this are being hidden and not taught in school. This is why critical race theory is important. This needs to be taught in school. We need to quit uplifting what y'all tell us to do. We need to quit uplifting criminals. Buchanan, before Abraham Lincoln, owned slaves. Come on now. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that's upset because y'all been attacking my podcast. And honestly, I enjoy it because at the end of the day, that just lets me know I'm getting under y'all skin because I'm speaking the truth. And the truth hurts. So what are we going to do? Are we going to walk in this truth? That way we can hold hands and we can walk in love together. That's the only way. You have to live in truth in order to live in love. You can't have one without the other. And as long as you continue to deny the truth, there will never be any unity in this country between races. We will constantly be fighting and battling each other over race. And let me make one thing clear. I love everybody regardless of whatever race you are. Black, white, purple, brown, yellow, it don't matter. I love everybody. And I'll sit down and shake hands and break bread with anybody, whether you agree or disagree. That's fine. You can have your own opinion. But again, everything that I say on here, I back up with research. And the only thing I ask of my people is to continue to walk in truth. Continue to walk in love. Be unified as one. Continue to fight this battle because that's exactly what it is. We've been fighting this war for hundreds of years in this country. And the thing they hate the most is that we continue to survive. That's why they're trying to pick us off the way that they are. It's because we are survivors. Because we walk in truth. And we don't deny our children their history. We don't lie to our kids about what's going on in the world. And then when they get out into the world, they're all confused. Well, this ain't what mommy and daddy said it was. No, this is the reality of what you live in today. This is what you're going to have to experience today. The sad part about it is, as a black father, with black boys and black daughters and a black queen for a wife, that there has to be guidelines when we walk out our front door. Because in this country, you don't know if you're going to walk into a grocery store and be judged by your skin color and harassed or even killed just for having darker skin, more melanin in your skin than the person standing next to you. But a time is coming, and you can feel it and you can see it, that things are changing and our voices are not going to be silenced no matter what you do. So the choice is yours. Are you going to stand with us or are you going to stand against us? But the only way to stand in unity is to stand unified in truth and expose the lies that they've been trying to teach us, expose the lies that they've been teaching us growing up. And with all the technology and access that we have to information that we didn't have growing up, they cannot control the narrative anymore because it's at the tip of your fingertips. You can go and look the information up yourself. So continue to love, continue to fight, continue to stand unified, my people. I love y'all, and I hope this information has helped somebody. I hope this information has enlightened you, and that's for all races. I hope this has helped open up your eyes to the bigger picture, to what's going on today. Again, I love y'all. Continue to be unified. Continue to walk in truth. Thank you for tuning in to the Black Liberty Podcast. God bless.